Little snippet from the movie 2012, if people have seen it. It looks like I have a technical difficulty. We're not having any volume with this vid. But anyway, you can look it up on YouTube yourself, and at the 1 minute 15 second mark, as they're talking about the crisis and the plans and the things they have to do, he says, remember, Vancouver 2010. Dust off the plan. They had a plan for Vancouver 2010. Hey, you know what? It's 2010 and Vancouver Olympics are still going on. Wow. And as we said in one of the previous shows, and we'll go over it again with our emergency plans down in Bellingham, Washington, one of them involves an earthquake. That we're prepared. We're prepared to come across the border if we have to en masse from our new safety and security village. Another big thing going on at Whistler is someone found a suspicious map. A map of the athletes' areas. The RCMP went in there with their dogs and they didn't find anything wrong. But down near Bellingham, 30 minutes from BC, is the State Department's new setup, a $4.5 million field operations center that'll control 42 American law enforcement agencies, hundreds of National Guard. That includes some of the things like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, Food and Drug Administration, Center for Disease Control, the Navy, the FBI, and God only knows what else down in Bellingham, Washington, which isn't too far. They got those drone planes like they use in Afghanistan. And they make specific reference in this Vancouver Sun article, U.S. gears up for Olympic security, terrorist incident, and earthquake. So they're prepared. There's probably a few other things that they're prepared for, too. Because as Vice President Biden said, he's a student of history, so am I. I love history. Back in the day, when Nazi Germany wanted to be the European Union, they muscled up against Austria and they forced them to sign an agreement, just like we signed with the United States. It's one of those mutual defense and cooperation agreements. So we signed. Mr. Van Loan, one of our ministers, didn't hesitate to line us up with that puppy. So that entails that Americans can come across the border to defend Canada, and we can go to the United States, defend America. But, we got 16,000 police and troops there. Like, what's going to happen that we need some more? Like, are the Russians going to invade? Is it Red Dawn? The Chinese coming over? Don't think so. But I think if we were correct about our analysis with this crate that we were following, and someone smuggled in a dirty bomb or some biological weapons, and you release that pretty much at the same time you pop the vice president, maybe the Americans wouldn't even ask if they could come across the border. They're just going to come steaming across. And we can settle that 54-40 or fight scenario. That's a student of history thing, 54-40 or fight, and where we were going to put the boundary line and see manifest destiny unfold right before our very eyes. But see, while we were all watching the Olympics, we had some other things happen. We had our Prime Minister make some fine-tuning adjustments to NAFTA. See, Parliament's not there. So he's ruling by decree, I guess. But what he did is he made some amendments to NAFTA that would allow Canadian companies to bid on provisions of the U.S. Recovery Act, where before that was just supposed to be for Americans. And I really don't mind that because it's American tax money that's supposed to support American companies. And most of that money's already been allocated, so there's only $75 billion out of $275 billion left. So what Schicklgruber, our Prime Minister, came up with is he's going to allow Americans to bid on provincial and municipal government contracts. See, that way you can't have local boys in local places. Maybe it's not so bad for Toronto, but if you live in a small town like Hooterville or something, and you got to come by horse and wagon for 30 or 40 miles just to get close, well, maybe it's kind of a little uncomfortable to have other companies bid on some stuff, but he gave that away in perpetuity now. So now we have to treat these American companies, like one across the street from me here, down here on Bay Street. So good job, good job. That's the Deke. We're watching the beads and trinkets. We're watching the Olympics, and our prime minister gave away the country. He's a good man. But then maybe he was under the effects of this Anschluss agreement like the Austrians. It's either you do it, or we got the army south of your border, and we want to come across and kick your ass anyway. But fortunately for us, we had two very good mounted police people see this turkey, the mental patient, and bust him. So maybe they broke up a really big, broader plot. Nobody cares about who this guy is. He doesn't have a name. He's never been identified. Nobody knows where he's gone. He may not even be alive, or he could be in Guantanamo enjoying one of those nice Cuban cigars. Then our other traitors, the premiers, decide that they're going to get together and go to the first ever governor's meeting of the United States. That was held a few days ago. I look at it as that was the first meeting of the North American Union. And they want to have more, of course, because we got to have the North American Union. The big corporations said so. So Canada has something called the Council of the Federation. That's a Premier's Council. And I guess you elect them, so you got to do whatever they say, sort of almost. But that's not really democracy as I was led to understand it. Premier Wall is one of the big ones putting us up against the wall. Another thing that they want is they want to be able to get U.S. government subsidies for us to do things in the United States in this free trade thing. And I think that's wrong, too, because it's American tax dollars. Why should they be subsidizing Canadian companies? It doesn't make any sense. Jean Charest from Quebec, Premier of Quebec, is supposed to have been the instigator of this madness. And they just use public relations to sell it as just a nice thing. We're working for the environment. We're doing everything good and decent and proper. But you get to have no input, and you don't know what we talked about, and you don't know what was decided, because that's the way the North American Union's going to work anyway. And as Mr. Wall said, quote unquote, the devil is in the details. I'll bet he is. Of course, the 666 media describe it as a tentative Canada-U.S. deal intended to help Canadian companies get around American protectionist walls. In exchange, provincial and municipal governments would let U.S. firms compete for contracts here. That's a nice way of saying, we sold your soul and your children's soul and their grandchildren's soul because you were busy watching the Olympics. And maybe one day when you're scratching your nuts poor, holding on to your Olympic icons, you'll be wondering, why don't I have a job? How come all those American soldiers are here? And what does the BATFE mean anyway? Because they're kicking in my door. And I don't understand what happened with Mr. Peter Van Loan signed the Anschluss Agreement for Canada. And as an omen, always got to have a good omen. I remember when they gave away Hong Kong, and wasn't it Maggie Thatcher fell off the stage and broke her leg or something like that? There's a good omen. Well, we had a good omen. We had a Canadian school ship founder off Brazil. Of course, the Brazilians weren't too keen on wanting to get off their fat asses and get out there to help them kids, so they left them in the water for 19 hours, just wondering, do you think they're really sunk, or maybe they just had some other kind of problem? Why don't we call their mothers at home and ask them if they know anything before we decide about putting some fuel in our boats and going out there to get those little suckers? So they left them in the water for 19 hours. You think they were trying to kill somebody? Because they're not dead, I guess we don't get a list of the kids on that ship, the Concordia. But there's a bad omen. A Canadian ship, founders. And just to let you know how omens work, is this a good camera for me, Blue, here? Right there, this one, you can see that there. That's the front page of the Toronto Star. That's a good Bilderberg newspaper, too. That's the Sunday edition. You see some of those rescued kids, and they all got little blue caps from the frigate that came out from Brazil after the 19 hours. I guess the boys had to sober up, eh? Some of them sailors do drink a lot. But you'll see it's frigate number 42, right? 42. 4 and 2 is 6. F is the 6th letter of the alphabet. F42, F42. You know, you can boil that down to a nice 6662.